So the Switch 2 just got a pretty cool update that improves how Switch 1 games play in handheld mode. But that got me thinking about something else. I just beat Resident Evil Requiem on the Switch 2, and I realized that this is the first time in a very long time, such a long time, that I've beaten a AAA third-party game on a Nintendo system. We're talking about since the GameCube era. And honestly, that's a really cool moment, and something that I maybe didn't expect Nintendo to reach right away this soon into the Switch 2 era, where previously I wasn't looking to Nintendo or my Switch for these types of games, but now the Switch 2 has me reconsidering. What's going on, everybody? It's Zach from Switch Force. Let's talk about the Switch 2 changing the game for me. Now, I'm not somebody who often goes back and replays a lot of older games. So while I do realize that boost mode is very cool for a bunch of players and does up the ante on those Switch 1 games in handheld mode, allowing them to basically run as if they're in docked mode, and we've seen plenty of people posting all over about comparison shots of Xenoblade and other games where it's like, wow, the fidelity is definitely improved. You can tell there's a notable improvement. And I give Nintendo big kudos for pumping that update out quietly, without much fanfare. They didn't even make a trailer saying, hey, new boost mode. It's just boosted. But that's how Nintendo's been operating lately, right? They're in the shadows. For me, I was in the shadows with Resident Evil 9 because this is a huge game. I think Resident Evil Village is one of my favorite action games of all time. So Resident Evil Requiem was a very big deal for me. And historically, I never would have considered Nintendo for this type of game, because Nintendo wouldn't have had this type of game. Like, I really look back and I say, okay, in the Wii U era, they started off with Batman, Mass Effect, Call of Duty. I didn't really play those there, though, so I'd have to go back to the GameCube, when day one I got Rogue Squadron 2 on my GameCube, and I would play other top-tier titles. Some of them, hey, like Resident Evil, were only available on GameCube. So it's fitting that we're now back with Resident Evil Requiem, and how times have changed. Nintendo has been able to lure these third parties and attract these developers to put the time and effort in to make a game that I really wanted to play on my Switch 2 and that I felt good about playing on my Switch 2. I think that second piece of the puzzle is really important, and it can't really be qualified or quantified in the same way that you can say, yes, this system does have the power to put out graphics that, these games, they look pretty good. This system does have the onboard hardware to run something like Resident Evil Requiem at 60 frames per second. This Switch 2 screen is really good. These Joy-Con are improved. The Pro Controller is always a treat. But it's that non-tangible element. Is this Switch 2 good enough for me to enjoy a big third-party AAA title, a big new release, day and date on this platform? And the answer is yes. Resident Evil Requiem was great handheld, Resident Evil Requiem was great docked, and I did go back and forth and play both. I started out the game docked, I played majority of the, I'd say, middle two-thirds in handheld mode, and then I went back and finished the game in docked mode. And I don't think I felt that much of a difference in terms of my experience either way, which is a good thing. Maybe there's also an element that isn't. We'll touch on that in a moment. But I love that I could play it both ways and feel like I was still getting Resident Evil 9. I wasn't getting Resident Evil 9 halved. I wasn't getting Resident Evil 9, but with lag and tons of jaggies. I was getting Resident Evil 9 the way others were getting Resident Evil 9. And I was getting it maybe better because I had that flexibility to play it handheld. So when I visited my grandparents, I was still playing Resident Evil Requiem. I finally feel like I can play these big games on a Nintendo platform without feeling like I'm compromising, and truthfully, that could never be said with the Switch 1. I love Switch 1. There was a major issue with that system running third-party games, and some of the most exciting ones never came to be. We were supposed to get Marvel Midnight Suns, which I was so stoked for after 2K showed extreme support with their past catalog. They were like, hey, we're bringing Marvel's Midnight Suns. Never came out. I was pretty excited for Dying Light 2 to come to Switch. It never did. It just vanished off the face of the earth. But now, Switch 2 is front and center. Now Nintendo has concocted the perfect storm where third parties are not only here, they're not only great here, but they're succeeding here. So I'm back in a new boat. Where should I get the new third-party games on the Switch 2? Because, well, let's acknowledge PS5 does look better for Resident Evil Requiem. I did play a little bit of the game on PS5 and I was like, dude, this is some of the best visuals I've ever seen from a video game. And there was a small piece of me that said, you know, especially in the Leon big city scenes, I bet this game would have looked even more special on the PS5. But it was never enough to make me regret my Switch 2 playthrough, never enough to make me switch off of my Switch 2 playthrough. It really has made that shift where historically Nintendo was your secondary platform, and now the Switch 2 can legitimately be your primary platform. And for me, somebody that is big into Nintendo, all about the big N, I do have my PS5 and my Xbox Series X and my PC underneath the desk. And maybe I just won't have to use them all that often anymore. Honestly, a very cool feeling, and one I'm proud to share with you that, like, we get to experience this together. Nintendo's comeback, not only from the doldrums of the Wii U and their own first-party woes, but from gaming secondary console to primary console once again. Switch 2 may no longer be the place that I just go for Mario and Link and Samus. It might be where I can play everything. And that's becoming more and more true as Microsoft and even Sony are looking to put their games on this platform. Now, I acknowledge the Boost Mode update improving older games is interesting because it shows Nintendo is thinking about the full experience, right? They're not just thinking about the latest and the greatest, they're taking care of the audience who has their already established favorites. For me, though, the bigger shift isn't replaying games, it's that I actually want to play brand new games here, as well as my Nintendo faithful catalog. Both are great, though, and both show how Nintendo has rounded out the Switch 2 to take care of a very wide audience, and potentially a wider audience than even the Switch 1. And it's why, since before this system launched, I said, hey, this could be an even bigger hit than the Switch 1, which sounds crazy because that was lightning in a bottle, and it had games that were just absolutely magnificent, like Breath of the Wild. Never can really recreate that moment again. You can't recreate the pandemic Animal Crossing moment again. But the Switch 2 is an even better system. And as long as it has the software support from both third parties and Nintendo, we are in for a generation of all generations. You've got the third party relevance here. You've got the first party heavy hitters, and hopefully more coming soon. We know that there's got to be holiday games, and Nintendo is just in that waiting period, that hold mode, before they boost forward, if you will, and give us their holiday lineup. But the Switch 2 is changing my habits. And that's pretty crazy. The Switch 1 was a habit changer because it moved us into this hybrid console space. We could play in our bed, we can play at the doctor's office, we can play in the car, and we can of course play on our TV. I didn't think the Switch 2 would change my habits again because it's the same system but better. Nintendo was reserved on the gimmicks and instead emphasized the hardware, and I love that they did that. I think it's paid dividends already, as we see with Resident Evil Requiem. But this platform is evolving. And Nintendo is evolving because they've created gamer habit change yet again. I picked to play Resident Evil Requiem, the biggest game thus far of the year, and undoubtedly one of the biggest games of the entire year. A masterpiece of a Resident Evil, a fantastic AAA gem. And I played it on Nintendo Switch 2. Nintendo Switch 2. First time since GameCube that I made that call and then I followed through. It wasn't a fun diversion. It wasn't cute to see that it could actually run. And if this continues, Nintendo gets more and more day-and-date third-party releases, they get the effort and the love and the TLC that this platform deserves, I think many more players will start to feel the same way I do, and moving Switch 2 into the primary console role. So let me know your take in the comments down below, everybody. Would you play a big third-party AAA day-and-date release on Switch 2 over another platform where maybe you haven't made that pick in years? Like for me, since the GameCube, I carried out that Indigo GameCube out of my 10-year-old hands. It's been forever, but it feels good to be playing that type of title here on Switch 2. Nintendo Switch 2 is where I picked to play Resident Evil Requiem. That's saying something. Until next time, everybody, thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Love y'all lots. Switch Force out.